3, go.
Pastor Sam here in Mexico, not far from Juarez and El Paso, where today a terrible tragedy occurred. I'm here with your special after-hours edition of my Latin America War Report, available always on subscribestar.com/Gospel Gunslingers. Gospel Gunslingers on subscribestar.com. A terrible thing happened today. A lot of people were hurt and a lot of people were killed. This is an event which has numerous anomalies. It is an event also which has tremendous geopolitical implications and tremendous geopolitical forces that have come together and converged on El Paso, Texas this very day in early August of 2019. There were multiple shooters, reports say. Antifa had warned that they were coming to El Paso to cause trouble. And the oddest oddity of all is the presence in El Paso before the event of Manuel and Patricia Oliver, the parents of Joaquin Oliver, who was killed in the Parkland, Florida shooting. So I don't know what the odds are of the parents of that shooting victim being around. I'm curious how many of the Parkland shooting victims were Hispanic, because this event is obviously a trigger event that's meant to set aflame racial tensions between Latin America and the United States of America and its traditional demographics. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen. I'm here in Mexico. I just went up to the state capitol today. We're going to throw some video up here for you just to see what everyone was doing, just to see if all of the Mexicans were plotting the overthrow of the United States. And here's what I found. There was a zoot suit riot going on. They didn't even throw back a bottle of beer. It was just young people and old people out having a blast in the street right in front of the Capitol building and grooving out to American rock and roll. I might just let that play in the background. That's what was going on at the state capitol today. And there was a real demonstration a week ago. I'll get to that. But let's hit these geopolitical concerns. A lot of people don't know that deportation is the law now, not for Mexicans, but for OTMs, for other than Mexican people from south of Guatemala or from other places such as Africa, which transit Guatemala. The deal has been signed. It is law. Don't believe the fake news. I have some articles from Soy 502. 502 is the country code for Guatemala. This is a very socialist news outlet. They're very much against Trump. They're very much for the UN and for forced migration. And they're not for building America, whether it be the United States or the small nations of the Americas. They're not for that. They're for disruption, and so they are partial. They are not impartial, and they've been very against this pact, the Safe Third Country Agreement. Nevertheless, it is law. The Supreme Court has tried to hang it up, just like our Supreme Court and our federal courts try to hang up anything that Donald Trump does to make America great or to increase the security of the nation or to help people of any color and all color in the U.S. and in the world. Some judge has got to step in and put their nose in it and try to make a mess. Fact is, there are a lot of communists, not only in our United States government, but in the governments of Central America, and they may very well be rooted out. But here we have Kevin McAleenan, our acting secretary for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, also over the Border Patrol, which comes under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security. And here he is with President Jimmy Morales of Guatemala, one of the great conservative Trumpist presidents. You know, a lot of these guys got elected before Donald Trump did. Yes, believe it or not, Latin America is not our enemy. See, we share this history. After 1776, guess what? All of Latin America started throwing out the Europeans, outlawing the Jesuit order, getting rid of their tyrants and European overlords and viceroys, and they all followed our lead. Many of them have had multiple revolutions and bloody revolutions. It's something that we share as Americans all the way down to the southern tip of Chile. That said, Central America is really overrun with communists right now. And the only two guys that are standing in the way is President of Honduras and the President of Guatemala. And both of them are short timers. Their terms are going to end here very shortly. So it's a very good thing that this deal has been signed. Most of America does not know that the Guatemalan and US of A safe third country migration agreement is law. It is law. And Secretary McAleenan is in Guatemala. This is his 5th trip to Guatemala. It's not a new idea. We've been working on this and trying to make it happen for a long time. And although some of the fake news has said, after having signed this agreement, he's there to sell it to the Guatemalans. Well, we're trying to get this agreement ratified as soon as possible. It doesn't need to be ratified. The president has authority to do it. His minister, Enrique Degenhardt, who signed it, has authority to do it. We're allies. It is a security and economic partnership. And you know what part of the deal is? A lot of Guatemalans are going to get farm worker visas to come to the United States legally. Oh, how about we put a great big beautiful door in that wall? You know what? There's such a thing as a muscatine melon. And if you never had one, if you ever catch yourself crossing the Mississippi River about this time of year, you might want to get yourself a muscatine melon, because they are among the best in the world. Watermelons, cantaloupe, we're known for it. Our little part of the Mississippi Valley, and it takes a lot of people to pick those, and because of that, there's a tremendous Hispanic population there. Well, California's got the same thing. A lot of labor-intensive agriculture. And you know what? A lot of Guatemalans are going to get visas to come and work in those fields. Totally legal. Isn't that wonderful? And we could do the same thing with Honduras and El Salvador. Those agreements are in the works. We'll see if the communist Palestinian president of El Salvador is online with that. It's really the Guatemala Safe Third Country Agreement that has caused the saber rattling, and I believe that this is the causative factor behind the El Paso shooting, because all week long, okay, today's Saturday night late, 8 days ago on Friday, the agreement was signed, and then it did not come out in the news. And a few days later, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, a trickle of articles talking about the illegality of it and how it was a stretch, and how there would be challenges, and how there was already a challenge in the Guatemalan Constitutional Court, their highest court. Really, the communists of the world have not known what to do about this, because this agreement is the end of the line for the human traffickers, the sex traffickers, the labor traffickers, and the drug traffickers. It's the end of the line. It's the end of the line, because Guatemala controls the isthmus. And let me tell you, other than the workers coming across and the remittances of many millions of Guatemalans not being taxed when they send money back to Guatemala, in addition to all that, there's massive infrastructure and financial assistance that's part of this agreement. McAleenan said right off the bat, everyone was kind of waiting with bated breath for a figure. He said, well, we're going to put 40 million US in this right off the bat. We're going to put in $40 million to build the infrastructure to process these migrants and to see that they have what they need. Okay, that's a start. But the fact is, that's the tip of the iceberg. There is going to be so much cooperation and so much United States investment. But here's the deal. If it's known that migrants cannot get past Guatemala, and if they do, they will be deported back to Guatemala to make their asylum claim there, a lot of them are going to not come. They're not going to come on that dangerous journey where so many people lose their lives. And here's another thing. Being in Mexico, I talk to a lot of Spanish-speaking people, really from around the world. And one thing that they are only beginning to understand is that China is after the women of Latin America. So many of these caravans have a preponderance of military-aged males, and we might ask ourselves, where are all the women? Are they staying home, saying prayers to the Santa Maria? Let me tell you something about China. There is a shortage of eligible women. In fact, in China, a young, eligible, dapper gentleman really has to be a millionaire to get a date. It's unbelievable. There is so much competition for women in China because of their one-child policy and selective abortions over the years. Now, so many of those people are military age, they're males of military age, and there are no women for them. But Latin America is full of beautiful women. And I'll tell you, many of the Chinese that come, because I see them in Mexico City, I see them here, I see them in South America, doing my laundry, working with the hotels, cooking Chinese food all over the world. And most of these people have been sent to a Spanish language school. They're government backed to come in and take advantage of the free market systems and the involucros, they say in Spanish, investment invitation of Latin American countries. If people are going to come in and spend money and build infrastructure, they're very, very open to that. So the Chinese take advantage of that, and they send people in that have been to Spanish language school, and they have government money to come in and set up a laundry, set up a restaurant, set up a store to sell little cheap stuff. They're very common throughout Latin America. But let me tell you, they're looking for Latin American ladies. They're looking for the ladies. And this is all outside of trafficking, okay? And trafficking, we will see in the end how much of that actually occurs. President Jimmy Morales is a tremendous guy. He moved his embassy to Jerusalem. He is a Christian. He is fighting the United Nations. And all of big tech is against him. You know, there's a conservative candidate that's running, and their election, the runoff election, Sandra Torres on the left, who, by the way, really should be indicted. She has a rap sheet. Her crimes are known. She comes from a communist family like so many of these troublemakers in Latin America. And she should really be picked up off the street and tried in the United States. But she's ahead in the polls, and she got twice as many votes as the conservative candidate. But on August 11th, they are going to have their election. Secretary Kevin McAleenan has met with Sandra Torres and with Dr. Alejandro Giammattei, the conservative candidate, separately and together, talking about the future of this deal, because in all likelihood, it will continue under one or both of their under one of their administration, depending on who wins. Of course, it's really not fair because big tech has censored Dr. Alejandro Giammattei. I was on his Twitter account just last week, and the feed was shut off. His Twitter has been defunct. It's been throttled. Big tech is meddling in this election, and I hope that we can clean that out of Guatemala. The Guatemalans are very much against this agreement, I would say the majority of them, because all of the propaganda is negative. They've been told that this is going to be a threat to their security. I watched it all on Soy 502, and it was all a bunch of tripe. So don't believe what you see in the fake news. This agreement is historic. It's going to help Guatemala so much, and it will shut down the migrant caravans coming from points south, many of which contain Africans, many of which have sick people that need to be quarantined. Well, we'll have a safe place to quarantine those people in Guatemala, instead of them riding around in the United States interior on aircraft and on buses packed with other people. That is the place to have diseased persons, is in quarantine. So in Latin America, there's a small percentage of the population that's been heavily propagandized. It's very small. There are people that have been in camps, that have been starved. It's not fair what's been done to them, and I hope that we can get in and root out some of those globalist organizations that have tortured those people, to include the Maduro government. I'm going to not get into Maduro and the Venezuela situation in this teaching, except to say that there are a lot of migrants that are coming from Venezuela, and that has been proven. The real issue here, and yes, we're talking about El Paso. President AMLO of Mexico was on today saying, I can confirm that 3 of the deceased victims of the El Paso shooting were Mexican citizens, and we're giving all assistance to those persons and to their families. AMLO campaigned saying Mexico will be the protector of all the migrants of the world. So here we have 2 conflicting situations. We have the Mexican victims, which I'm not happy about. I love the Mexican people and even the Guatemalan people. Many Guatemalans have worked on my crew. I've worked on jobs with them. I talk about what they eat in their family and their village where they're from, and we have a tremendous time. I take them out to eat sometimes afterwards, and we get a big plate of Mexican food and have a blast, and we talk about all kinds of things. These are the people that I, even in the U.S., live among and work among. And you know what? Their Zoot Suit Riot was really a lot of fun. And this was just tonight. Tonight when some of their countrymen had been cruelly gunned down. You know, this supposed shooter, Patrick Cruso, he does not look to me like a Trump supporter. He looks like a sheep-dipped liberal Democrat. His comments about the environment, his comments against petroleum, against industry, against productivity of our nation, his talk of overpopulation is very, very, very suspect. And of course, if nothing else, this is a madman. And the gospel gunslingers absolutely decry and denounce his actions. And Patrick, you're lucky that there was not a couple of gospel gunslingers up in that Walmart, or you may not be facing a trial, a fair trial, an objective jury, and a warm, cozy prison cell. But on the other hand, from these 3 Mexican nationals and the other persons deceased is the A$AP Rocky situation. Here's an American whose right to self-defense, whose right to self-determination, whose right to freely travel in the world has been seriously infringed. And I'm thankful that our president took it very seriously. Because A$AP Rocky absolutely has a right to defend himself, just like every gospel gunslinger. And it's something that the Europeans might just learn from a few people like A$AP Rocky, is how to whoop a Haji's butt when they come into your country and start raping women and start causing chaos and start burning cars every night, like is happening in Europe, to include Sweden and Denmark. Now, President Trump took this situation so seriously that he called the Prime Minister of Sweden, and he sent over a high-powered lawyer who actually carries the rank of ambassador within the United States State Department. That's Robert C. O'Brien, and he is the head of American hostage affairs worldwide and carries the rank of ambassador. And he went over and he sat in that trial just to make sure that A$AP Rocky's right to defend himself was not infringed. But now AMLO has come to the table to support people's right to violate the sovereignty of another nation. And that is what he stated on the campaign trail. So on our Latin America map, Mexico carries the hammer and sickle, because there is, I'm not going to say elected, since over 200 officials, candidates, and incumbents were murdered in the run-up to this election, but in power is an avowed socialist. The t-shirts that everyone wore said AMLO-Vich. It was something that Lopez Obrador embraced, his communist heritage, the fact that he believes that this model, the communist model, is the future of the world. And so Here we have two very different examples. The right of the migrant and the right of ASAP Rocky to defend himself against a migrant. And even though this wacko accused shooter, Patrick Cruso, claimed to be defending himself and defending America against migrants, make no mistake, that is an error in judgment. Many of the Hispanic people in the United States are more family-oriented. They are more patriotic. They are more proud of America. They are quieter workers than the broad spectrum of American society. And there is not, in the south of Texas, a great deal of racism because almost everybody is Hispanic. The families are all intermarried. How do you think Beto ever got his brown card? Is because he lived in an area where everybody was Hispanic to some degree or had cousins that were intermarried with people of Hispanic lineage. It's part of Texas history. It's part of New Mexico history. It's part of American history, even all the way up the Mississippi to Muscatine. It's part of our history. And you know what? There's a lot of Hispanics that are great Americans, and we want it to be that way. So America's not buying this. America's not going to catch fire with race war, especially against the brown man of Latin America. Latin America, especially Mexico, has already got their finger on the pulse, and they already know what the score is, and they're not buying these globalist efforts to get them to cause chaos in the United States. They're out dancing to American rock and roll because they love it, and because they love the US of A. So let's go on and be good neighbors and be good friends, and we'll throw out the globalists. We'll throw them out of Central America, South America, and out of the United States of America in the name of Jesus. I'm Pastor Sam. Thank you for joining me in the Gospel Gunslingers for your Latin America War Report and Migrant Invasion News. Please go to subscribestar.com/gospelgunslingers to get your most current version of the Latin America War Report. And please subscribe and support the work. Thank you, friends. Be great Americans. I'm Pastor Sam.